And of course, it's been a horrific few days here in the United States of America. In Pittsburgh, the terrorist suspect, Robert Bowers, is accused of murdering 11 people in a synagogue. Elsewhere in the United States, in Florida, the terrorist, Mr. Sayak, is accused of sending live bombs and committing a terror act, or the accused terrorist, Mr. Sayak, I should say, is accused of sending bombs to a number of Democratic Party leaders and commentators. And in order to get a handle on just what is going on in our country, what these two acts of violence might represent, and whether they were prefigured or presaged in any way, we thought we would talk to one of the people I consider a great expert on this subject. He's been on the show before. David Neiwert is an American journalist. He writes for, among other places, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. He has written a number of books, including his latest, Alt America, which is about the rise of the right in the age of Donald Trump. And he joins us now. So first of all, Dave, thanks for coming back on the program.
Good to be here, Rich.
Well, it's always great to talk to you, Dave, although I got to say, under these circumstances, these is not so great. So, first of all...
When we always talk, it seems like...
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And, you know, I've got to say, you're the expert in this area, but there was part of me, as horror-stricken as I've been by these events, there was a part of me that's been expecting it, and maybe even was a little surprised it hadn't happened sooner. But what are your thoughts on these acts of violence?
Yeah, well, it is extremely difficult to predict them, but, you know, as you know, I've been warning people that this stuff is coming for a long time, mainly because the American right has been drumming it up for a very long time. I mean, really, this is not happening overnight. This is happening because we've had 10, 15 years of structural changes in the culture, American political culture, that have basically gone to, you know, basically one of the parties in the country has gone insane and gone completely over the cliff and into the abyss. And normalcy is not on the immediate horizon.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that party. And of course, I think it's safe to assume we're talking about the Republican Party here. I want to talk to you about that a little bit because, you know, we get into this question of what is and isn't different about Donald Trump as a political figure and as the president of the United States. And I'm constantly fine-tuning this in my own mind because on the one hand, I do feel there are exceptionally different things about Donald Trump in terms of the rhetoric he uses, in terms of his use of coded white nationalist and racist symbolism and code phrases and so on. But on the other hand, and I keep going back to this, the Republican Party has been making appeals to bigotry for decades now, going back to, you know, Reagan and the welfare queens and Richard Nixon. And so to what extent is the rise of hate speech and perhaps, and of course, and it should also be said that no individual act of violence, it's tough to tie an individual act of violence to an individual statement or series of statements or whatever, but to what extent is this surging climate of hate we're experiencing now and that you write about in your book, Alt America, to what extent is that a product of Republican Party rhetoric, you think, and to what extent specifically in the last couple of years, particularly Donald Trump rhetoric?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just classic appeals to right-wing authoritarianism. And that's really the underlying dynamic that's going on here, is that the Republican Party for the last 20 years has been increasingly appealing to right-wing authoritarian personalities. And so now they have a party full of right-wing authoritarians. And yeah, and it has to do with, you know, it's not just the bigoted attitude. It's actually underlying it more than anything is this disdain for principles of equality and fair play. The thing that really kind of sets right-wing authoritarians apart from the rest of us is that they don't see equality as a major social value. They see inequality as the natural state of things, and that when you try to fix it by imposing equality, particularly equality under the law, equality of opportunity, those kinds of things they see as attempts to mess with the natural order of things, and so they oppose it. And yeah, that's really the big difference between them and us in a lot of ways.
Well, that's a really
and they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and you used that's a really interesting concept. The idea that inequality, which most of the rest of us and liberals, progressives, but I think moderates too, if there are any left,
if you believe in democracy, yeah.
Yeah, if you believe in democracy, if you believe, in minimal concepts of fair play, then you think, you may not go as far as others might, but you believe everybody deserves a fair shot. You believe in a level playing field. You believe everybody deserves an education. But you've said that it's an interesting way to put it, Dave Neiwert, that you're really saying you're messing with the natural order. That's the way they view it. That it's a violation, and in a way, it seems to me that the step from there to violence is not all that big. If you really feel that your opponents are defiling the way nature is supposed to work, it's not that big a jump to want to defend that with violence, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, usually the steps that are in between entail, demonization of other people and specific targets, and spread of eliminationist attitudes. And use of eliminationist rhetoric, which basically creates permission for the violent acts to take place. But yeah, no, once you've decided that your enemy is, or your opponents are actually an existential threat to you and your family and your loved ones, then yeah, anything becomes excusable. And that's how they do it in their minds. And this is what is the meaning of Trump doing all this drumming up of rhetoric in the last few weeks, calling Democrats an angry mob and incapable of governing and that sort of thing. And then going on and then adding on in the anti-Semitic stuff with the Soros plots, and then going on and on about the invasion of Latinos. All of these things he's posing basically as existential threats to the nation itself. And once you do that, once you've created this image of your opponents or your targets, as it were, as an actual threat to your life, then anything becomes excusable. And remember the story that Trump likes to tell on the campaign trail or at his rallies about the snake?
The snake, yeah, remind me. I knew it and I forgot.
It's the one where it's a poem that he reads about a woman who picks up a poor snake frozen in the snow and nurses it back to health, and her reward for it is that the snake bites her fatally, right?
Right.
And it's of course meant as a metaphor for immigrants, and when he reads it, immigrants and refugees, and Muslims, and this is what and it's a classic eliminationist sort of story, because it reduces the target to not only being vermin that you would normally just kill without a second thought, but actually vermin that can kill you.
Yeah,
a lethal threat.
Yeah, And I
So
just to jump,
this is what he does all the time.
yeah, and you know, again, we're talking with author David Neiwert about the rise of right-wing terrorism, and I'm glad you made that second point about the reduction to vermin, because this seems to me to have been a classic totalitarian slash fascist stratagem for many decades now, is to making the, perhaps for all of human history, for all I know, of making your opponent less than human, so that it becomes something of less gravity to harm or kill them. Isn't that part of the strategy too?
Yeah, I mean that's got a long history in it, and yeah, and European. It's very deep in the European mindset, and so yeah, um, this is very much a white European thing.
And I have a Jewish background, and I mean, I have two branches of my family, but I had a bar mitzvah. I have a Jewish background, and I've been amazed at frankly, any Jewish person who thinks they can embrace Trumpism. And I don't want to get into overly
Yeah,
controversial stuff here, but it seems to me that, you know, you're riding a tiger you can't climb off of once you get on this kind of train, right? I mean, I'm mixing metaphors, but
yeah,
you know, that once you start othering, for lack of a better word, Muslims and Latinos and LGBTQ people and Democrats and liberals and all the other people that are the target of this kind of hate, any group, Jews can't be far behind, even though Trump is.
frequently they're at the very front, and that's the thing is that anti-Semitism is kind of is really the oldest of these eliminationist targets. It's got the really longest history. In fact, I would say probably the earliest acts of eliminationism that we can find in Europe were the Jewish pogroms of the 10th, 11th centuries. So anti-Semitism is really it's wired into our culture in really deep ways. So and disturbing ways, obviously.
And I feel, Dave, you and I have known each other maybe, what, I don't know, 10, 12 years or something.
And I think something like, yeah, 2006.
Yeah. So I feel that during that period of time, there's been an evolution, and that Trump, while he's not unique or does not stand apart, maybe he's the culmination of it. I mean, I'm thinking back to like when Bernard Goldberg wrote, the 100 people who are destroying this country or whatever, and then there were threats against some of them because, after all, why wouldn't? And I believe even some were targeted, because why wouldn't you attack people who are destroying your country, right? That in retrospect almost seems tame compared to the kind of rhetoric we're seeing now from the Proud Boys, from and the fact that they're getting a wink and a nod from the President of the United States. They're good people on both sides and all of that kind of stuff. So is this going to an even scarier place if we don't do something about it?
Oh yeah, no. We're headed straight towards um, uh, possibly the worst episode in American history if we don't correct our course. We're heading towards genocide. All of the pieces are in place. We're definitely at very high risk of an extremely violent episode in our history coming up in the next few years, particularly around the defense of Trump. Mm-hmm. I think 2020 is going to be really a horrible year because, if Trump loses in the election, they won't accept it, and they will fight to the death to keep him in office. If he wins, then they will be even more empowered and feel that they have free reign to act out violently as they do. And probably they won't be fueled and angry quite as much if he wins. But if he loses, it's going to be a problem. And obviously, any of the investigations, if the Democrats take the House here in this coming election, and they start holding investigations in the House, not only will there be strong resistance to that, I'm quite certain there will be domestic terrorism related to that as well.
Well, I guess we have to wrap up now, and I'm struggling to end on anything resembling.
Yeah, anything positive.
Thanks, Dave. Geez, thanks.
Yeah, I know.
But I guess I would say
I do have kind of a positive.
Well, let's hear it before we run out of time.
I mean, I'm just I believe in the the Maori have a saying. The Maori in New Zealand have a saying, kia kaha, translates roughly as stay strong or be strong. And an American would think of that as, I'm just going to be strong by myself. But for the Maori, it means join arms with everybody in your tribe. Join arms with the people that are humans like you, and share your attitudes, and because that is the true strength that we have. There are many more of us than there are of them. We just have to stop fighting amongst ourselves, and we need to kia kaha.
Well, I think that is a fantastic way to conclude, so I thank you for that. David Neiwert is the author of the book Alt America, which, according to your publicist, is now out in paperback. In fact, I have a copy on my desk. So, David, thanks for all the great reporting, and as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich.